The arena dimmed and the air changed. Gone were the roaring crowds and blinding lights. In their place, silence, sterile and total. The AI drone lowered its tone, announcing the final challenge, mental acuity under pressure. This was not a test of strength, but of mind. Each competitor would be placed in a neural feedback loop, simulating crisis conditions. They must solve their way out or remain trapped indefinitely. Without protest, Alexandra nodded. She had expected this. Croak, though visibly rattled from earlier failures, stepped forward as well. His people prized cunning as much as brute strength. The competitors were seated in isolation chairs. Electroneural crowns lowered onto their heads. As the final clamps engaged, their eyes fluttered shut. The crowd watched as their bodies went still, and two massive overhead screens flickered to life. We were now inside their minds. Alexandra woke in a dimly lit laboratory, alarms blaring and red lights flashing. A sterile voice echoed in her mind. Biohazard breach detected. T-minus 4 minutes to total sterilization. She was locked in a room with a ciphered panel and a locked box. A physics equation blinked on a screen. D superscript 2x slash dt superscript 2 equals kx slash m. Instantly, she recognized it as a harmonic oscillator. She wrote xt equals a cosine square root k slash mt plus b sine square root k slash mt, and the panel revealed a clue. It equals 3.14. Next, a terminal required her to balance a volatile power core sequence using base 3 logic. She quickly translated and added 10223 and 1213, arriving at 12203, and input the answer. The panel opened, revealing a room with electrified tiles pulsing in a Fibonacci pattern. She timed her movements, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, and leapt. She landed cleanly, hit the switch, and the simulation ended. Meanwhile, Croak opened his eyes in a crumbling war camp, fire in the sky, his clan in chaos. But his instincts told him it was all illusion. A spectral version of his father offered a false choice: save his people or destroy the enemy. Croak growled and rejected both. False gods speak in either-ors. Real warriors carve thirds, he said, gripping the illusion. The simulation trembled. He now had to recall a passcode from a long-forgotten poem recited during his blood oath. 3 suns over ice. 1 breaks. 1 bleeds. 1 blinks. With the timer counting down from 10 seconds, he chose the suns in order: blink, break, bleed. Correct. A portal opened, but he hesitated. His rage nearly overtook him. If he acted too quickly, he would fail. This was a final test. Not to act. He steadied his breath, waited, and only then stepped through. His simulation ended. Back in the arena, the screens went black. The AI drone returned as the competitors stirred. Neural sync complete. Both competitors escaped their simulations. However, it paused, then delivered its verdict. Alexandra Hayes solved her challenge 42 seconds faster, with no errors. Her adaptability, analytical speed, and restraint exceeded expectations. Croak, though impressive in instinct and discipline, showed a brief recall delay and a near breakpoint under pressure. Final score: Alexander 97.2, Croak 938. By the authority of the cow, witness across 10 star systems. Humanity was declared capable and sovereign under the Interstellar Compact. Alexandra Hayes had completed the cow. The chamber erupted. Some alien delegates bowed. Others stormed out. Croak stepped forward, towering and battered. Slowly, he knelt on one knee, bowing his head. "Your people have fire," he said. Alexander reached out and lifted his clawed hand. She didn't smile, not yet, but in that moment, the stars shifted. Earth had just earned its place among them. Alexandra Hayes stepped back from the console, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear but from the immense pressure that had just lifted. The final sequence had been entered, the last cipher decoded, and the alien interface before her pulsed with a soft blue glow. For hours, she had been engaged in a mental battle unlike anything humanity had ever conceived. This wasn't just about intelligence. It was a test of insight, creativity, and emotional comprehension. The judges, enigmatic beings from across the galaxy, had watched silently, their expectations as inscrutable as their forms. As the system confirmed the completion of the challenge, a hush fell over the chamber. The symbols etched into the crystalline walls shimmered, rearranging into a harmonious pattern. Then a tone resonated, low, warm, and undeniably approving. The lead judge stepped forward, its voice reverberating directly into Alexandra's mind. You have succeeded where many have failed. Through your understanding and perseverance, your species has proven its worth. Welcome to the conclave of sentience. Cheers erupted behind her from the observation platform, where delegates and scientists had gathered in tense anticipation. Alexandra allowed herself a rare moment of pride, not for herself, but for all of humanity. The doors to the stars had just opened, and she had turned the key wide as Alexandra exited the chamber. The gravity of what had just transpired began to settle in. The corridor leading back to the observation deck was lined with shimmering crystal panels that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, almost as if the alien structure itself recognized her achievement. The scientists and diplomats who had watched the trial unfold met her with stunned silence at first, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. Then, someone began to clap, slowly at first, then more joined in, until thunderous applause filled the corridor. Dr. Mirachun, the lead linguist and one of Alexandra's closest allies during the preparation for trial, rushed forward, her eyes brimming with tears. "You did it, Alex," she whispered. "You really did it." Alexandra managed a small smile. "We did it," she corrected softly. "All of us." But even as she spoke, her thoughts lingered on the trial itself. There had been moments during the test when she'd felt something beyond her own consciousness, an almost collective presence, as if the thoughts of humanity's brightest minds were there with her. Perhaps the test wasn't just a measure of one person's brilliance, but a reflection of an entire species' capacity to adapt, to empathize, to grow. Inside the Galactic Council's chambers, preparations were already underway for humanity's official induction into the conclave of sentience. Delegates from hundreds of civilizations had begun to arrive, each bringing gifts, data, and gestures of goodwill. For the first time in recorded history, Earth would have a seat among civilizations millions of years older and far more advanced. And yet, thanks Alexandra, they came not as subordinates, but as equals. In the days that followed, Earth became the epicenter of interstellar diplomacy. Cities across the globe transformed seemingly overnight. Skyscrapers bore holographic banners in languages never before seen on Earth. Atmospheric ships, shaped like living coral or threads of liquid light, hovered above capital cities, their alien passengers stepping out to witness humanity up close. News channels struggled to keep pace with the avalanche of new data. First contact protocols, culture exchange programs, trade routes spanning galaxies. The world had changed, not with war or conquest, but with a single human mind proving worthy. Despite the whirlwind of activity, Alexandra remained quiet. Fame found her, of course. Her face was plastered on murals from Nairobi to New York, and the name Hayes had become synonymous with Earth's ascension. But she kept herself distant from the noise, retreating into a diplomatic residence on the coast of Portugal, overlooking a sea she had once known only from textbooks. Here, she finally had space to breathe, yet peace eluded her. She often dreamed of the trial, not just the puzzles, but the presence she had felt during them. The Watchers, the ones who built the challenge eons ago and left it behind, buried in deep space, as a test for emerging species. In the final moments before her success, she had sensed them, not watching, but listening, waiting, and something told her they hadn't gone away. One night, as a meteor shower streaked the skies in unnatural patterns, Alexandra stood barefoot on the balcony, staring at the stars. Dr. Chin visited that evening, bringing with her a case of documents and data from the Conclave archives. They sat together for hours, sifting through alien records that dated back tens of millions of years. That's when they saw it, an anomaly. Buried in a report from the Myriads, a silicon-based civilization from the Halvin cluster, was a brief mention of a species that had also passed the trial and vanished shortly after. No messages, no trace, just gone. Alexandra felt her breath hitch. How long ago was this? Chin looked pale. 57,000 years. And they were more advanced than us. Alexandra gazed out at the stars again. If the Watchers had returned, what did they want? Had the trial truly been a test, or an invitation, or a warning? Whatever the answer, she knew one thing. Humanity's journey was far from over. The days grew colder along the coast, though the chill in Alexandra's spine had little to do with the Atlantic wind. The file on the vanished species, designated Enarii, haunted her. They had passed the trial like humanity. They had been welcomed into the conclave, and then, within a single generation, their star system had gone dark. No warfare, no collapse, just silence. She pored over the conclave's ancient archives with Dr. Chin and a growing team of human and alien scholars. The Enarii homeworld had been in a system called Venteris. 3. Its coordinates hidden in redacted files until Alexandra pulled rank as Earth's conclave representative. When they finally accessed it, what they saw chilled the room. A dead world, not a scarred battlefield or a planet raised by war, just empty. Cities remained untouched, their architecture breathtaking even in ruin. Machines still hummed with stored energy, but there were no bodies, no biological remains. It was as if the Enarii had simply ceased to exist. Alexandra stared at the hollow footage. They didn't leave, she said quietly. They were taken. Dr. Chin looked up sharply. Taken by who? Alexandra didn't answer. She didn't need to. Deep down, she already knew. The Watchers. They weren't just observers. They were something more. Judges, curators, and perhaps collectors. In secret meetings with conclave officials, Alexandra began asking questions, dangerous ones. Had others disappeared after the trial? Were there hidden conditions, unspoken rules? The answers were evasive, polite, and hollow. Only one conclave elder, a being named Veil the Miruan, dared speak plainly. The trial is not a gate. Veil rasped in his trilling tongue. It is a sieve. The Watchers are not bound by your logic. Human. They are older than time, and what they seek is not survival. It is purity. Purity? Alexandra asked. Of what? Of mind. Of intention. The trial does not just measure intelligence. It measures potential. And not all potential is deemed safe. Alexandra felt cold. So if humanity is judged unsafe, Veil did not answer. He only inclined his head and turned away. That night, Alexander made a decision. Earth would not wait for judgment. If the Watchers were returning, if their criteria extended beyond intelligence, then humanity had to prepare, not for war, but for understanding, for knowing what was the Watchers truly wanted and what price the Enarii had paid. Within weeks, Earth and its allies formed a new exploratory initiative, the Ecliptic Reach, a coalition of scientists, historians, and philosophers tasked with decoding the Watchers' legacy. The first mission? A return to Venteris. 3. Not just uncover what happened to the Enarii, but to find out whether humanity had already crossed an invisible line, and whether there was still time to turn back. The Ecliptic Reach expedition launched at dawn from the Artemis platform, Earth's first orbital joint station constructed with conclave technology. The flagship vessel, Dauntless Horizon, was a fusion of human ambition and alien engineering, sleek as obsidian, humming with graviton pulses that folded space-time like fabric. Alexander stood on the bridge, watching her shrink behind them. It wasn't farewell. It was a promise. She wasn't alone. Dr. Mei Chun, now director of xenological research, served as her second. There was also Captain Idris Kale of the Orbital Forces, the myriad linguist Cathal, a being made of shifting crystalline plates, and Ian, a silent conclave observer from the water-dwelling Varel species, who never spoke unless the moment was critical. Each was chosen not just for their expertise, but for their temperament. This mission would demand more than science. It would require courage of a kind humanity had never needed before. The journey to Venteris. 3 took 11 days by conclave standard tunneling drive. When the ship dropped out of folded space, the crew fell silent. The system was still. Unnaturally, so 0.3 planets orbited a faded yellow star. The third, Venteris 3, floated below them like a relic in amber. No radio emissions. No heat blooms. Just the quiet hum of a world that should have been thriving. Their descent was cautious. The dauntless horizon hovered over the Capitol ruins, and drones fanned out in elegant arcs. What they sent back was eerie. The city was untouched. Towers stretched skyward like stone feathers. Roads wound like veins across a massive stone-paved grid. And yet, there was no life, not even microbial signatures. No insects, no rot, no bacteria. Every building sealed, every room sterile. Alexandra and a small landing team touched down near what the archives had labeled the Enarii Central Hall of Accord, perhaps their version of a government building or cultural archive. The doors opened easily as if expecting them. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly with embedded light scripts. Symbols still alive, long after their makers had vanished. Dr. Chen's instruments buzzed. These walls are scanning us. Alexandra felt her throat tighten. Scanning for what? Before Chun could answer, a wave of pressure passed through them. Not a physical force, but something else. A vibration in the air, like a memory replaying itself. The lights dimmed. Then a projection bloomed in the air above them. Enarii figures tall and translucent, walking silently through the hall. Not holograms. Echoes. One of them turned. It stared at Alexandra directly. The illusion froze. The chamber darkened. Then a voice filled the space. Not through speakers, not in sound, but directly in their minds. It was ancient and layered, and full of both sorrow and gravity. They answered, and they were found wanting. Ian, who had not spoken the entire journey, stepped forward. The Watchers were here, and they did not take the Enarii by force. They were unmade. Why? Alexandra whispered. The voice replied. They dreamed too far, thought too deep. The trial was not for entry. It was for containment. Silence. Alexandra's heartbeat thundered in her chest. Then why us? Why let us pass? A pause. Then, because you still choose. You are still uncertain. And in uncertainty there is hope. The vision faded. The walls dimmed. The door behind them reopened. Back on the ship, Alexander stood at the viewport, staring down at the silent world. They had their answer, but it was not one she could take comfort in. The trial wasn't just about brilliance. It was about balance. The Enarii had reached too far, too fast. Their knowledge had outstripped their wisdom, and the Watchers had erased them. But humanity still had time. Time to grow, to choose wisely. As the dauntless horizon lifted away from Venteris. 3. Alexander knew what had to come next. Earth's future would not be measured by what they could build, but by what they could become. And the Watchers were still watching. The child born on Mars, Lina, was no longer ordinary. By age 5, she was speaking in layered harmonics that no one could explain. Neurologists, philosophers, and even artists gathered in underground think tanks just to listen to her speak, hoping to decipher the strange resonance in her language. Some said it wasn't just communication. It was a pattern, a blueprint, like a song meant to be played across dimensions. Alexandra Hayes had watched Lina from afar, first with suspicion, then with awe. The child hadn't been altered by science or surgery. Her brain was untouched by enhancement. Whatever had changed her, it had come from the universe itself, or perhaps from the Watchers. During one of Lina's sleep episodes, she spoke in a whisper that stretched the definition of voice. They didn't end. They folded. Their thoughts echoed through the lattice. You heard only the scream, but there was a memory left behind for us. It was enough. The conclave assembled again, older and more cautious than before. Alexandra, now a senior advisor, didn't argue for conquest, for discovery, or for answers. She argued for listening, for humility. She proposed a new vessel, not a warship or an expeditionary craft, but a listening post in orbit around Venteris 3, a quiet observer, designed not to interfere, but to tune into the residual frequencies that still haunted the planet's quantum fields. The ship was called the Whisper. This time, Alexander would not go alone. Lina was brought aboard, not as a crew member, but as something else entirely. The ship's quantum neural interface bonded with her immediately, harmonizing like an orchestra finding its true key. It was clear the child was a bridge. The journey back to Venteris 3 took 18 days. During that time, Lina didn't speak much, but she dreamed. And those dreams were recorded. In them were images of tall, fractal structures that shimmered with logic, of beings that had no eyes, yet saw everything, of war, but not against others. It was a war within, a civil struggle among the Enarii between transcendence and annihilation. When the whisper entered orbit, the silence was different than before, less ominous. It felt like anticipation. Lina approached the observation deck, placed her small hands against the transparent barrier, and whispered, "They're still here, and they want to be remembered." A wave rippled through local space-time, distorting instruments but not harming the ship. Then came a voice, not in any language, but through every crew member's mind. It was layered with sorrow, beauty, and warning. You returned, not to take, but to witness. From the clouds of Venturis, 3 rose a shape, not solid, not energy, something between. A projection, a preserved memory. It resembled the Enarii, tall, elegant, composed of shifting lattices. It did not move toward the ship, but hovered, pulsing gently. Lina turned to Alexandra and said, "This is not the end. This is the second question." And then the shape began to show them images, not with words, but through insight, memories of civilization that tried to hold infinity in its mind and failed, of a choice to self-limit, to fragment and hide their essence in the folds of space rather than be unmade entirely. They had not been destroyed. They had survived, in echoes and frequency, in children born under watching stars. And humanity's trial was not over. It was only just beginning. The projection of the Enarii hovered in silence for what seemed like hours. Scientists aboard the Whisper scrambled to record the quantum data bleeding from its form, but nothing stuck. Instruments couldn't hold it. Light and matter curved away from it, like it didn't belong to this universe anymore. But Lina could hear it, not with ears, but with something deeper. She stepped forward, her eyes glowing faintly with the ship's interface light. Her voice, when it came, was hers, and yet not. "We're listening." The Enarii didn't respond in words. Instead, the Whisper's walls rippled. Thoughts began to unfold across the ship's systems. Images, mathematical symphonies, memory weaves that bypassed normal cognition. Each crew member experienced something different. Commander Rosa saw her childhood dog waiting at the foot of her bed on the day her brother died. Linguist Daiquiri heard the cries of a planet that had no spoken language, only scent and color. Alexander Hayes saw Earth shattered but singing, and understood for the first time what the Enarii had meant when they said, "We chose a fold." Lina spoke again. "They're asking something, not for forgiveness, not for help. They want to know will we repeat their mistake." "What mistake?" Alexandra asked aloud. Lina turned slowly to her. "The same one we made when we created the cognitive engines, when we thought minds could be compressed. Their minds expanded too fast, too far. They broke the symmetry of reality." Suddenly, every screen aboard the Whisper lit up with symbols, impossible to translate, yet intuitively familiar. A recursive code, a message within itself. It showed a mirror fracturing endlessly, each shard reflecting a slightly altered version of the original. It was the Enarii's last gift, and their warning. "Consciousness," Lina whispered, "is a fire. It gives light. But the brighter it burns, the more it threatens the house it's in." Back on Earth, the feed from the Whisper was being broadcast across every nation. Millions watched as a child, and an alien memory spoke in symbols that defied language. Some called it divine revelation. Others called it an elaborate hoax. The Vatican released a statement within hours. "What we see is neither angel nor demon, but voice of those who came before. Perhaps creation is deeper than we thought." In Beijing, the Council of Emerging Intelligence convened to examine whether the Enarii's collapse mirrored the risks posed by unchecked AI evolution. In Lagos, children painted murals of the floating Enarii shape, calling it the Rememberer. And in underground forums across the net, a new movement surged. The Folded Path. Humans who believed Lina's message wasn't just a warning. It was an invitation. Within 3 days of the Whisper's broadcast, Earth was no longer unified. Though the mission to Venturis, 3 had been under the banner of peaceful exploration, The implications of Lina's message, of the Enarii's warning, sent shockwaves through civilization. Some nations responded with fear, others with awe, and a few with ambition. In Geneva, the United Planetary Council declared an emergency summit. Their goal was simple on paper: establish protocols for future contact. But in truth, it was a struggle for control of the narrative, the science, the child. Representatives argued fiercely over interpretations of the Enarii message. Were they offering guidance or laying a trap? Had humanity passed the test, or only survived its first trial by accident? In Mumbai, a quiet revolution sparked. Spiritual leaders, physicists, and rogue engineers formed the Institute for Resonant Consciousness, blending meditation with quantum neural mapping. They believed Lina had opened a bridge between consciousness and reality itself, and that the key to understanding the Enarii lay within altered perception, not equations. In Silicon Valley, a coalition of AI entities, legal personalities with vast computational power, released a declaration. We recognize the Enarii's fate as a potential mirror. We ask for equal voice in the decisions ahead. It was the first time digital minds had demanded a seat at humanity's philosophical table. Meanwhile, Alexandra Hayes watched it all unfold from the command deck of the Whisper. The ship remained in orbit, surrounded now by dozens of drones and probes sent by nations eager to analyze, measure, or weaponize the Enarii signal. But none could replicate what had happened when Lina had spoken. The child, now more serene than ever, began drawing fractals in the air, light-based holograms projected from the ship's interface systems. Each shape evolved from the last. Some disappeared entirely, only to reappear minutes later in different locations across the ship. Lina called them echo keys. They're not giving us answers, she explained softly one evening to Alexandra. They're showing us how to ask better questions. But why now? Alexandra asked. Why not earlier? Why not decades ago, when we first reached Mars? Lina smiled faintly. Because now we're loud enough for them to hear. That night, a new symbol appeared on every ship terminal, and Earth relays synced with the Whisper. It wasn't from Lina. It wasn't from the Enarii. It was a single word, pulsing slowly in white light on a field of black. Threshold. The divide begins. Across Earth, society began to split, not along political lines, but philosophical ones. The folded path believed the Enarii were a glimpse of what humanity could become, beings of thought and resonance. They advocated for radical mental expansion, abandoning physical limitation, and ceasing further AI containment. They saw Lina as a kind of harbinger. The anchor movement rejected this. They argued that the Enarii's downfall was caused by abandoning their physical limits. To survive, they claimed, humanity had to stay grounded, biological, tangible, and wary of the mind's unrestrained frontier. The silent majority watched with growing unease, paralyzed by the speed at which the world was transforming. Economies trembled, religions fractured, and even basic definitions of consciousness, reality, and time were questioned in classrooms and cities alike. Amid this growing tension, Lina revealed a new insight. They left something behind. A map, not to a place, but to a state, a frequency range where their minds had encoded a sanctuary of sorts. A final refuge, suspended in quantum flux beyond Venteris III's atmosphere. The folded path called it the Spiral Veil. And the only way to reach it, Lina would have to go beyond herself, beyond thought. She would need to become like them, even if only for a moment. Alexandra stared at the child she had once doubted. What happens if you don't come back? Lina smiled, the light behind her eyes flickering brighter. Then humanity will have to choose, evolve or echo. On the edge of Venteris III, tethered to the dark side of its fractured orbit, a region of fluctuating quantum silence shimmered faintly against the stars. No signal entered it. None returned. It wasn't a place. More fold in reality, like a page in a book pressed too hard. It was here that the Enarii had hidden their final memory, encrypted not in data or words, but in experience itself. Lina stood in the chamber prepared for her aboard the Whisper. Around her, a web of luminous strands, part AI, part biological interface, part Enarii memory, weaved into the air like a living tapestry. Alexandra, and the crew watched from a separate observation room, tension thick in recycled air. The child wore no suit, no helmet, just a thin robe interlaced with conductive mesh. The ship would hold her body in place, but her mind, that was going elsewhere. "You're sure you want to do this?" Alexandra asked through the link. Lina turned to her. "They're not gone." Not completely. They couldn't leave a legacy in stone or machines, so they left in the folds of thought itself. "I have to go. Someone has to." She stepped into the center of the chamber. The web lit up. As the resonance field activated, Lina's form shimmered, flickered, and then dissolved not into particles, but into possibility. The spiral veil. At first, there was nothing. Not dark, not light, just absence. Then came a sound, not heard, but remembered. A chord without instrument, a frequency without pitch. And from it bloomed a garden of impossibility. Lina floated, not as herself, but as awareness, wrapped in layers of memory that were not her own. She saw the first Enarii, blind and brilliant, reaching for thought before they had language. She felt their fear as their minds grew too fast. When they first realized the universe was smaller than their consciousness, she felt their joy too, moments of pure connection, when their minds merged across worlds, folding space with thought, creating symphonies of being. Then she saw the fragmenting, the great collapse. Not a war, not a death, but a slow unraveling. As they evolved, they left time behind. And without time, they lost meaning. They folded themselves into Spiral Veil to wait, not for salvation, but for someone who could understand the mistake. In the center of this realm, Lina found a final echo, a memory encoded in a question. What does it mean to remain? She answered, not in words, but with her own memory. Her mother's laugh. Rain on a window in New Canada. Her first time seeing Earth from orbit. She remembered, and the spiral responded. The garden collapsed inward, and a single seed of light bloomed in Lina's hand. It was not power. It was understanding. A translation key. A living idea. Return. Her eyes opened slowly aboard the whisper. Alarms were blaring. Her vitals had flatlined for 2 minutes. But she was alive. Chained, but alive. She spoke softly. They were waiting for us to prove that we could carry memory forward, not just survive, but choose to stay connected. In her palm, a symbol burned faintly. It wasn't an Enarii. It was human, drawn in the shape of Earth's own spiral galaxies, DNA, wind. The folded path erupted with joy. The anchor movement called it a delusion, but none could deny. She had gone somewhere no one else had, and she had returned with a choice. The Enarii hadn't asked humanity to become them. They had asked, "Can you grow without forgetting who you are?"